I am Sophia, on the verge of turning 27 this year, and I've enjoyed 5 years of marital bliss. Recently, my son Jasper marked his 4th birthday, a joyous occasion. Initially, I worked full-time after tying the knot, but now I balance part-time work at the same company. My husband, Carter, is 30 years old, 3 years my senior. Our journey from dating to marriage was initiated by Carter's passionate advances, but post-marriage, I observed the shift in his demeanor towards a more domineering side. Carter has a 20-year-old sister named Daisy, and their age gap seems to contribute to a somewhat indulgent relationship on Carter's part. Before marriage, I didn't mind Daisy's frequent visits and assumed they got along well. However, after tying the knot, I started noticing changes in her behavior. Daisy often drops by unannounced at any time and expects to be served without ever bringing a token of appreciation. Rather than addressing the situation, Carter expects me to accommodate her demands. Daisy acts as though I'm invisible, addressing only Carter with a casual, "Brother, I'm here again," despite not preparing for an additional guest. I end up serving dinner to Daisy and Carter instead of understanding, blaming me aloud, insisting I should have been more considerate. Despite Daisy's verbal apologies, it's evident she relishes Carter's preferential treatment. Left with leftovers, I prepare my own meal while Carter and Daisy continue their chat on the sofa, leaving the dining table messy. They never acknowledge Jasper or me, treating us more like hired help than family. One evening, as I'm about to take a bath with Jasper, Carter interrupts loudly, instructing me to buy a cake for Daisy despite it being late. Daisy insists on having it immediately, and Carter blames me for delaying. Feeling compelled, I reluctantly head to the cake shop with Jasper, until overhearing their conversation, I learn they're criticizing me for being inconsiderate and questioning the decision to marry me. Meanwhile, Jasper, though unable to grasp the words, senses tension in our relationship. Suppressing my emotions, I ask him about his cake preference, and he cheerfully requests one with lots of fruits. Our trip to the cake shop is filled with discussions about cakes, momentarily pushing aside Carter's early words. Jasper and I arrive just before closing time, fortunately finding the cake Daisy desired. We purchased 2 cakes, including the fruit-loaded one Jasper wanted. Back home, I serve the cakes to Daisy and Carter, then prepare Jasper's cake and head to the dining room. The moment I place it in front of Jasper, Daisy points and expresses her desire for that cake. Before I could react, Carter moves Jasper's chosen cake in front of Daisy, disregarding Jasper's protests. Carter justifies his action, claiming he bought the cake with his earnings and had the right to choose for Jasper. Unable to contain my emotions any longer, I voice my dissatisfaction in response. Carter threatens with divorce. Jasper, who had stopped crying, anxiously holds my hand and then, after some thought, says, "Mom and I also love cake with strawberries on it." "Yes, it's really delicious." He mentioned this while eating a cake initially wanted by Daisy. Feeling that Jasper was enduring too much, I lifted his cake plate when I saw Daisy reaching for it. I took Jasper to the next room so he could enjoy his cake in peace. Carter apologized to Daisy, claiming he was sorry for being stingy. Despite wanting to retort, I held back for Jasper's sake. Watching Jasper innocently enjoy his cake was a heartwarming sight. After finishing the cake, we decided to have a late bath and sleep in Jasper's bed. The next morning, I discovered Daisy had already left as I prepared breakfast. I heard Jasper crying shockingly. His piggy bank, a gift from my father, was broken, and the saved money was gone. Jasper, who always said good night to the piggy bank, was left heartbroken. When I questioned Carter about it, he casually mentioned that Daisy needed some money, so she took it from the piggy bank. Holding a crying and shaking Jasper, I felt his pain so acutely that I cried with him. It was painful to witness Carter prioritizing and caring for his sister more than our son. Expressing my anger and sadness, I confronted Carter, breaking my usual silence on arguments in front of Jasper. Carter, without a word, went to the bedroom and returned with something shocking in hand: divorce papers. I discovered the hidden divorce papers that Carter had tucked away somewhere I didn't know. In a sudden burst, he confronted me, shoving the papers at me before storming out of the house with a loud bang. Jasper, who had never cried over the issues with Carter and Daisy, seemed to have reached his limit, crying since last night. Unable to bear seeing Jasper so hurt, I suggested skipping daycare for the day, and he happily agreed with a loud yes, showing a faint smile. We spent the day playing and bonding with Jasper, bringing a picture book from the shelf, sitting on my lap, and happily remarking, "The teacher at the nursery today was Mama, right? He looks like an angel." His little heart seemed filled with patience, and I decided to make the day special by taking a day off from work. Despite causing potential trouble at my workplace, they kindly understood the situation and granted me a day off. In the morning, we visited the park, played hide and seek, and had fun in the sandbox and on the slide. When we returned home for lunch, Jasper appeared sleepy, usually napping by himself. But today, he fell asleep on my lap like when he was a baby. Though I initially thought of doing household chores during his nap, I decided that today was special instead. I allowed myself to be healed by his peaceful sleeping face and gentle breathing. However, my serene moment was abruptly interrupted by a noise from the entrance, indicating the front door had opened. As it wasn't Carter's usual time to come home, I became suspicious. I quickly hid in the bedroom closet, clutching Jasper. A voice echoed through the house, and to my surprise, it was Daisy, trembling with fear. I listened as she searched for something, expressing frustration over not finding it. Daisy then made a phone call, mentioning Carter and discussing their unsuccessful search. After hearing her lock the front door and leave, I put Jasper to bed and contemplated the strange events. I couldn't comprehend why Daisy had entered the house and what they were looking for. Suddenly, Carter seemed like a stranger, and I felt a mix of disgust and fear towards him. Swiftly packing essentials for Jasper and myself, we headed to the station and took a train to my parents' house. Fortunately, their home was nearby, just 2 stations away. Although I hadn't contacted them beforehand, my parents sensed something from my expression and welcomed us without asking questions. I shared the entire ordeal with them, including my fear of staying at our house due to Carter and Daisy's actions. Upon hearing my mother's suggestion that Daisy might have been looking for my belongings, possibly cash cards, I recalled my past experience as a successful CEO in the handmade goods industry. I had entrusted the company to friends when I decided to prioritize raising my child after getting married. Although I still worked part-time and communicated with the company from home, Carter was unaware that I was still the CEO. I discovered the hidden divorce papers that Carter had tucked away, suspecting that he thought I had a decent amount of savings. While I've mentioned to him that I still receive some assistance from the company, I've deliberately kept the details about being the CEO and my savings private. This secrecy stems from realizing early in our marriage that Carter struggles with managing money and tends to spend everything he earns. Carter, at first, provided only $2,000 a month for food expenses and even suggested I quit my job to become a full-time housewife. However, with the financial strain of raising Jasper and only $200 for food, I never agreed to be a full-time housewife. Eventually, he reluctantly allowed me to work part-time, and to ensure I wouldn't consider divorce, he had me sign a post-marital property waiver through a lawyer. Since Jasper's birth, I used my savings for his nursery fees and clothes. As I've only received $200 for food, I've never asked Carter for additional funds beyond the food budget, leading him to believe I have savings. Considering Daisy's apparent need for money and Carter's perception of my financial situation, they might be searching for my cash cards. I have a separate savings account dedicated to Jasper, with a portion of my salary directly deposited into it each month. Despite their search, they won't find the cash cards as I always carry my valuables. However, there's still an unsettling issue. Daisy might be entering our house even when we're not there, and Carter may be allowing it, following my father's advice. I decided to store my valuables, including the cash cards, in my parents' safe as I pondered their need for money. Jasper approached my father crying over his broken piggy bank and the shattered promise of saving up. My father, angered by Jasper's story, vowed to call Carter. My mother suggested finding out their purpose calmly, as Carter's mention of divorce might shift blame to us, making the divorce more favorable for him. To ascertain their purpose, I decided to record their conversation. Consulting a lawyer who was a friend of my father's, upon returning home, I began cooking dinner, keeping my phone screen down to record secretly. Carter arrived home, surprising me by immediately asking about my cash cards. When I questioned him, he gave vague answers, attempting to deceive me. When I remained silent, Carter grew agitated and demanded all my part-time money for his sister. Refusing, I explained it was for Jasper's savings. In response, he angrily pushed the signed divorce papers toward me, declaring that I was living off his money and didn't need to save for Jasper. He even uttered words implying he valued Daisy more than our son. Hearing this, I stopped preparing the meal, put the divorce papers in my bag, took Jasper's hand, and headed for the door. Carter, in a loud voice, declared his serious intent for divorce, instructing me never to come back. I responded by stating I wouldn't return to a house where a stranger could come and go freely. After leaving, I received numerous messages and calls from Carter, which I ignored, turning off my phone. I sought refuge at my parents' house, sharing the recording and divorce papers with them. Although I confessed to having no love or affection for Carter, I expressed concern for Jasper. My parents advised me to do as I pleased. Acknowledging the potential emotional impact on Jasper if a divorce were to occur, while grappling with the decision to divorce Carter, Jasper expressed his hunger. My mother, seeing my distress, kindly made hamburgers, his favorite dish. Overwhelmed with emotions, tears welled up in my eyes as my mother told Jasper with a warm smile that she prepared the hamburgers so that he and I could visit whenever we wanted. Taking a bite, Jasper exclaimed with joy, praising Grand's hamburgers and expressing a desire to eat them every day. I responded, saying it's because the hamburger contains the love I have for him, and he, in a touching gesture, took a big bite and offered it to me. Moved by Jasper's kindness, my tears couldn't be held back, and even though I tried to stop them, they persisted. My father, noticing Jasper's concern, reassured him that my tears were of happiness, not sadness. Hearing this, Jasper, in a moment of understanding, hugged me, and my father's eyes turned bright red, realizing the blessing of being with family. I remarked to Jasper that family is precious. Surprised, he questioned if Dad had mentioned that only Daisy was family. My father gently confirmed it but then asked Jasper if he wanted to live with them as a family. With a laugh, Jasper happily agreed, making everyone smile naturally. Despite contemplating divorce, the meal felt so happy that I finally decided to part ways with Carter. I planned to inform Jasper about it, and even though discussing it weighed heavily on my heart, Jasper seemed to grasp the situation. Happily, he expressed the desire to live as a family, embracing the pet dog and calling him his younger brother despite the dog being older. Preparations for the divorce began, starting with contacting a lawyer who was a friend of my father. The next day, we formalized the contract, and my father and Jasper shared comforting laughter while I lay in bed, reminiscing about my childhood. The following day, upon checking my smartphone, I found over 200 calls and messages from Carter, showcasing his emotional instability. Exhausted, I turned off my phone, and with the lawyer's assistance, we explained the situation to my parents. Daisy had accumulated significant debt from a casino and shopping addiction, and Carter acted as her guarantor, planning to use my savings. The lawyer confirmed that the divorce papers had already been submitted, and Carter sobbed upon realizing it was finalized. Despite expecting disagreements about child support, he signed a pledge to pay $340 to Jasper every month. In a subsequent call from Carter, his tone lacked aggression, and he calmly admitted to financial manipulation, explaining his complex feelings toward Daisy. I firmly asserted my decision not to reconsider and heard his faint sobbing before he wished me happiness and hung up. Remaining strong until the end, I discussed future plans with my parents and decided to stay with them until Jasper grows up. I resumed my role as a company president and later learned that Carter and Daisy had informed their parents about the divorce and debt, resulting in disownment. Today, I find happiness being with my family.
You might say that I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth because my name is Victoria. Although we weren't extremely wealthy or anything, I had a really nice upbringing. With their constant hand-holding and kissing when they thought I wasn't watching, Mom and Dad looked like they belonged in a romantic comedy. Our home was a small, comfortable suburban home. It was simple, but it was home. Every weekend seemed like a little journey. After loading us all into our dilapidated station wagon, Dad would drive us away. Sometimes they went hiking in the state park nearby, and other times they went to the local movie theater to see the newest blockbuster. School was just that, school. I was just your typical student attempting to make my way through the maze of puberty. I wasn't the popular kid, but I also wasn't the outcast. There weren't many of my buddies. Genuine pals, not the phony ones that only visit when it suits them. Exams, embarrassing school dances, and late-night study sessions driven by junk food and excessive coffee made high school go by in a flash. Graduation was approaching before I realized it. A pile of college brochures was arranged in front of us as my parents and I sat at the kitchen table. "So, Vicky, any idea what you want to do with your life?" Dad said, holding his reading spectacles on the point of his nose. I inhaled deeply. This was it, the moment I had been anticipating and dreading. Blurting out, "I want to be a cardiologist," an entire discussion without a word was shared between Mom and Dad, one of those stares that parents seem to perfect. "All right," answered Dad at last. "If this is what you really want, we'll make it happen." Admission to medical school was only the first step. The 4 years that followed were much more demanding than college. I was attempting to fit so much knowledge into my brain that there were moments when I felt it might blow apart. However, there were also incredible moments, such as the first time I successfully took a patient's blood, followed by a few humiliating mishaps. The day I identified a heart murmur during rounds, and the realization that all of my hard work was truly making me a doctor. The day of graduation felt unreal. My parents were in the audience when I crossed the stage to get my graduation. Naturally, Mom was weeping, and even Dad appeared to be in tears. Dad put his arm over my shoulders as we walked out of the theater. "So, Dr. Adams," he smiled, "what's next?" Feeling the weight of the future on my shoulders, I inhaled deeply. I now declared my intention to become a cardiologist. I had no idea how far my adventure would take me. The true difficulties were actually only getting started. I jumped right into my work at a private clinic in the metropolis after graduating from medical school. Despite the long and exhausting hours, I relished every second of it. I was at last fulfilling a lifelong ambition of mine, saving lives and assisting others. My efforts began to bear fruit as the months went by. I had more money than I knew what to do with for the first time in my life as my bank account expanded. One day, I entered a car showroom on a whim and drove away in a brand new, elegant sedan. It was mine, purchased with my own hard-earned money, even though it wasn't very showy. I signed the mortgage documents for a large apartment in a desirable area of town. A few months later, I couldn't help but feel proud of myself as I stood with the keys in the empty living room. I was living the life I had longed for. I made the decision to visit my folks for a few days off as the holidays drew near. I was thrilled to tell them about my accomplishment as I hadn't seen them in months. However, I felt something was wrong the moment I entered the house where I grew up. It was too quiet in the home. Despite being in the same room, Mom and Dad might have easily been on separate worlds. There was a chilly, awkward quiet in place of the cozy, affectionate ambience I had recalled. The tension was evident at supper. Mom and Dad hardly exchanged glances, much less words. In the icy air between them, my attempts to fill the void with tales about my job went hollow. Mom was cleaning the dishes when I ambushed her in the kitchen later that evening. "What's going on, Mom?" I asked in a quiet voice. "You're behaving like strangers, you and Dad." The soapy water caused Mom's hands to go still. She didn't look back. However, I could tell that her shoulders were tense. She replied, "It's nothing, honey," in a strained voice. "The only thing is that people change. I'm not the same person as your father anymore." However, I was acquainted with my mother. The pain in her voice was audible to me. "Mom, please tell me the truth." With a sigh, she turned to look at me. I was heartbroken by the sorrow in her eyes. "A few months ago, your father received a promotion at work. A young woman who worked as a personal assistant arrived with it." I felt sick to my stomach. "Mom, are you saying?" With tears in her eyes, she nodded. "He has been increasingly staying late at work. She may be his mistress, in my opinion." It seemed as though someone had hit me in the stomach. Was my father, whom I had always looked up to, having an affair with my mother? It seemed impossible. I said, "I'm going to talk to him," as my chest grew irid. "How dare he do this to you?" "No, Victoria," my mother murmured, taking hold of my arm. "I've made up my mind. I intend to submit a divorce petition. I spoke with a lawyer, and everything is set up." I gazed at her in disbelief. "Divorce? Can't you figure it out, though?" She gave a sorrowful grin. "My dear, there are certain things that are unfixable. Furthermore, I don't want you to become entangled in this. Your father is not someone I have any animosity toward, and I don't want you to either. These things do occur in life. We must have empathy." Her composure in the face of all of this astounded me. I would be heartbroken and incensed if it were me. However, my mother handled everything with dignity and elegance. Devastation followed the divorce, which struck like a hurricane. Bless her heart, Mom, she didn't give up easily. She wanted more restitution for Dad's adultery and half of everything. Dad, he must say, didn't argue. He made the payment without any hassle. The true kicker, though, Dad married his helper before the divorce papers were even dry. His mistress. This is my new stepmother. I saw her and almost choked. She was just a few years older than me, and for heaven's sake, she was 22 years younger than Dad. Although I didn't want anything to do with her, she was more like a friend to me than my stepmother. I avoided contact and only spoke with Dad and his kid bride when it was absolutely necessary. Seeing him with her was painful because it showed how fast he had moved on while Mom was still grieving. Life threw me another curveball just when I thought things couldn't be any more confusing. I received a job offer from a renowned clinic in a different city. 2 years, excellent compensation, and the opportunity to train under one of the nation's most prominent cardiologists, Dr. Harriet Chen. The chance was once in a lifetime. As soon as I heard the news, I called Mom. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," she said with sincere delight. "You must accept it. This might have a significant impact on your career." Her excitement was contagious. Excitement sprang up inside of me for the first time in months. This was my opportunity to start again, away from the turmoil. Dad contacted me the next day, so I guess word got around about my upcoming transfer. "Vicky," he murmured in a tentative tone, "I've heard you're relocating. Yes, Dad received a fantastic job offer. He interrupted me. Listen, I have a question for you. I mean, it's a little uncomfortable. Things aren't going well at work. My income has decreased. While you're away, is it possible for Sarah and I to use your apartment and maybe borrow your car? I couldn't speak. He had the audacity to ask this after everything that had transpired. I'm not sure, Dad. I must give it some thought. With my head spinning, I hung up. He was still my father, even if I wanted to tell him to go lost. I feared Mom's response to my surprise, so I called her. She was at ease. It's your apartment, your car, Victoria, she said. You are an adult. What you do with your belongings is up to you. Whatever you decide, I won't take offense. Her maturity made me feel insignificant and inconsiderate. I agreed over the phone with Dad after a restless night. It seemed unreal the day I turned over the keys. Sarah had this smug expression that made my skin crawl, but Dad looked guilty. Sarah spoke out as I gave the keys to Dad. Well, isn't that pleasant? The keys are at last being returned to their proper owner. She smiled sulkily and nodded at Dad. I looked at her and then at Dad, feeling confused and angry. Dad swiftly drew me away. Vicky, honey, he said in a whisper, I need your cooperation. It's possible that I informed Sarah that I owned the vehicle and flat, and that I had just been letting you use them. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, so I stared at him. I had always liked this man, so why was he asking me to lie? To act as though I hadn't put forth a ton of effort to get all I owned. Something shattered inside of me at that very instant. The last vestige of my father's respect disappeared. I decided after glancing at him, this guy posing as my father. I turned and left my own flat without saying anything. I was flying to a new city 2 days later to start a new life. I felt as though a burden had been lifted as the aircraft took off. I wouldn't have to endure any of this turmoil for 2 years. I could concentrate on my career and my goal of being the greatest doctor I could be. The 2 years spent in the new city seemed to go by quite quickly. Our weekly Skype chats served as a lifeline to my mother, allowing me to stay in frequent contact. As she created her new life, she always looked better, her eyes regaining their glitter. Dad, however, was another matter. We just made audio calls. He said he was unable to understand all of this new video technology. I refrained from pushing it. It was difficult enough to hear his voice. Seeing him with his new wife made me question if I could manage it. I was conflicted when I returned to my hometown when my contract expired. I dreaded the family trouble I had left behind, but I was eager to go back to my former clinic. My pulse was racing as I stood outside the familiar door on the day I went to retrieve my apartment. However, the key would not turn when I attempted to unlock it. I scowled and gave a loud knock. The door opened and Sarah's irritated visage appeared. Oh, she uttered firmly, it's you. I halted in shock as I shoved past her and entered the flat. It was a completely different place. My subtle, subdued colors were gone to be replaced with gaudy, eye-strainingly brilliant hues. My tastefully selected furniture was gone, replaced with contemporary items that terribly mismatched the overall style. The biggest surprise, though, was entering my former bedroom. With a cot and change table, it had been converted into a nursery. What the hell is this? I turned to Sarah and demanded. She put a hand on her extremely pregnant tummy and grinned. Some adjustments have to be made. After all, this is our home. Your home? I sputtered. This is my apartment. Sarah's gaze grew strained. No, this flat belongs to your father. He has just been allowing you to remain here out of generosity. I am now the lady of the home since I am his wife. I started to protest and tell her the truth, but I hesitated for some reason. My rage subsided as I saw her large tummy. No matter how angry a pregnant lady was, I couldn't bring myself to put her under unnecessary stress. I paced the gaudily adorned living room for the next few hours. I jumped when Dad finally entered the room. "Dad, we need to talk, now." With a weary expression, he nodded. "I understand, Vicky. Let's go outside." When we were alone ourselves, I relaxed. "Dad, what the hell? What's this about my flat being your place when you led her to ruin it completely?" He placatedly raised his hands. "Yes, I am aware. Sweetheart, it's complicated." I was unable to force myself to be honest with her. "Things aren't going well at work. Vicky, please don't throw us out if Sarah found out we were living off your generosity. Not with the impending baby." I wanted to be upset. I wanted to hurl them both out on their ears, shout, and become angry. But I couldn't do it when I saw my father, this shattered, begging image of the powerful man I knew. "Fine," I said through gritted teeth. "We'll figure something out." Relief washed over his face. "Thank you, sweetheart." "Oh, and there's one more thing," he added. I braced myself. "I may have given Sarah your car when I found out about the baby. I wanted to do something nice for her. I'll pay you back, I promise." I closed my eyes, counting to 10 in my head. "It's fine, Dad. The clinic's not far. I can walk." He kissed my hand, his eyes brimming with gratitude. "You're an angel, Vicky. We'll make this work. You'll see." As I watched him go back inside, I tried to convince myself this could work. I'd be at the clinic most of the time anyway. Maybe I could even learn to get along with Sarah. I threw myself into work with renewed vigor. The clinic became my sanctuary, a place where I could escape the tension at home. I'd leave before dawn and return long after dark, tiptoeing through the apartment to avoid waking Sarah or the newborn baby. 2 months into this routine, fate threw me a lifeline. I was grabbing a quick coffee at my favorite cafe when I quite literally bumped into him. Tall, with kind eyes and a crooked smile, Jake was charming from the moment he helped me mop up my spilled latte. "I'm so sorry," he said, handing me a wad of napkins. "Can I buy you a replacement?" Coffee turned into dinner, which turned into more dates. Before I knew it, we were seeing each other regularly. For the first time in months, I felt light, happy. Jake was funny, smart, and best of all, completely removed from my family drama. I started spending more and more time at his place, relishing the peace and normalcy. It was a blissful respite from the chaos at home. But reality has a way of intruding. One evening, I arrived home to find Sarah waiting for me, her face like thunder. "Where have you been?" she demanded, bouncing a fussy baby on her hip. I blinked, taken aback by her tone. "At work, then out." She thrust a mop at me. "This place is a mess. Your father can't afford a housekeeper, so you need to pull your weight around here. I'm busy with the baby." Anger flared in my chest. "I'm not your maid, Sarah. I work 60-hour weeks saving lives. I'm not spending my free time cleaning up after you." Her face contorted with rage. "You ungrateful little freeloader, living off your father's generosity, and you can't even help out. Maybe we should kick you out, see how you like that." I couldn't help it. I laughed. The sheer audacity of her threat was almost impressive. "Good luck with that," I said, turning away. For the next few days, I ignored Sarah's pointed looks and passive-aggressive comments about the state of the apartment. I focused on work and on Jake, counting the hours until I could escape to his place. Then one afternoon, my world imploded. My phone rang. It was Jake. "Hey," I answered, smiling. "I was just thinking about you." "It's over," he cut me off, his voice cold. I felt like I'd been doused in ice water. "What? Jake, what are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb, Victoria. You know exactly what I'm talking about. I can't believe I fell for your act. I honestly have no idea." "Save it," he snapped. "We're done. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, stunned. What the hell had just happened? Seconds later, a message popped up. It was from Jake. A photo. My heart stopped as I opened it. It was me, locked in a passionate kiss with a man who definitely wasn't Jake. Except it wasn't me. The woman in the photo looked like me, but something was off. The hair wasn't quite right, the posture not quite mine. Realization dawned along with a wave of fury. Sarah, this had Sarah written all over it. I tried calling Jake back, desperate to explain, but my calls went straight to voicemail. Text messages bounced back undelivered. He blocked me. I stormed into the apartment, fury radiating from every pore. Sarah sat on the couch, a smug smile playing on her lips. She knew exactly what she'd done. "You," I snarled, advancing on her. "What the hell have you done?" Sarah's laugh was like nails on a chalkboard. It was easy, really. A little Photoshop here, a few messages there. You'd be surprised what people will believe when they're jealous. The casual way she admitted to destroying my relationship made my blood boil. "You fabricated that photo? And what messages?" "Oh, just a couple social media postings about how you're hunting for someone wealthy than your partner and dating other men. The typical gold digger fare, you know." I was furious and unable to speak. How could somebody be so harsh and heartless? Sarah's gaze grew strained. "Listen up now, princess. This is where you're going to start contributing. Take care of the baby when I need a break, clean the house, and do the laundry, or else." "Or else what?" I spit. "Otherwise, I will ensure that your father is aware of your lack of gratitude. Your head will spin at the speed with which he will kick you out." That was it, the last straw. I flung back my head and let out a rough, sour chuckle. "You really don't get it, do you?" My voice was dangerously low as I spoke. "I live in this flat. I spent my money on that. If you don't apologize and help me make amends with Jake, you'll be the ones living on the streets." Anger twisted Sarah's face. She parted her lips to respond. However, the front door opened at that very moment. When Dad entered, he appeared worn out and perplexed by the scene in front of him. Sarah started ranting right away. "Your daughter just said something you won't believe, John. After everything we've done for her, she's threatening to throw us out. I want her gone because she is a selfish, ungrateful person." Dad looked at me, begging. "Just go along with it, Vicky," he said, leaning in close. "We'll work this out later, so go away for a little." I gaped at him in shock. I was asked to leave my own house by my own father. I felt something crack within of me. "No," I answered in a cool, steady voice. "I'm done complying. I live in this flat. I'll contact the cops and have you both taken out if you don't leave by tonight." Dad's expression grew glum. "Following all that I've done for you? By allowing you to live here for free and use my car, I've more than made up for the money I spent on your schooling and fancy medical degree." I said, "We're there now. Leave." Sarah was yelling profanity. I refused to listen to Dad's attempts to reason with me. As they packed their belongings, Sarah alternated between yelling at me and crying uncontrollably while I stared in stony silence. Dad gave me one final look as they left the house. "Victoria, you'll regret this. Take note of what I say." My just regained flat seemed eerily quiet. I was struck with a strong sense of resolve as I sat there surrounded by the gaudy relics of Sarah's decorating binge. No more giving up anything. No more modifying my life to fit in with the deceptions and manipulations of others. Now was the moment to take charge. I took up my phone with trembling hands and dialed my mother, the one person I knew I could always rely on. My voice cracked as I continued, "Mom, I need to talk to you." I let it all out, the deception, the manipulation, the last altercation. My frazzled anxieties were calmed by Mom's careful listening. When I was done, she replied, "Oh, honey, I'm so proud of you for defending yourself. You made the correct decision." Her remarks felt like a comforting hug. "Thank you, Mom, but Jake is no longer with me." Everything was wrecked by Sarah. The person on the other end of the line paused. "Perhaps not. Give me the number for Jake." "Mom, what are?" "Believe me, my love, I'm capable." I handed her the number in a confused but optimistic manner. Mom texted me the next day to ask if we might meet at our favorite cafe. My heart almost stopped on the way there. Jake was seated across from my mother. With a playful twinkle in her eye, Mom gestured for me to approach. "Victoria, please sit." I was just enjoying a nice conversation with Jake. Mom told the entire arranged story over the course of the following hour, including Sarah's falsehoods and Dad's deceit. Jake listened with a look of surprise, rage, and embarrassment on his face. Jake looked to me once Mom was done, regret shining in his eyes. "I'm very sorry, Victoria. I ought to have trusted you. I ought to have given you an opportunity to clarify." The pain was still fresh, but I wanted to forgive him. "Jake, you were so quick to assume the worst of me. How can I be sure that you won't do it once more?" Jake slipped out of his chair and fell to one knee in the midst of the crowded cafe, which completely shocked me. "Adams, Victoria, I cherish you. If you allow it, I'll live out the rest of my days making up for the foolishness I committed. Please pardon me." With everyone watching us, the cafe had fallen quiet. My neck started to flush, but as soon as I saw Jake's sincere gaze, my rage vanished. My words were, "Oh, get up, you big idiot," and I'd pull him to his feet. "Of course, I forgive you." As Jake took me into a kiss, the cafe erupted in cheers. Mom smiled at us both as she brushed away a tear. It's interesting how life works itself out. We learned through rumors a few months later that Sarah had left Dad and the baby behind and fled with a younger guy. It had now dawned on her that Dad had neither wealth nor property. In his despair, Dad made an attempt to make amends with Mom, but she turned him down. 3 years flew by, filled with laughter, love, and professional accomplishment. I said yes without hesitation when Jake proposed, this time on a moonlight beach. The day of our wedding was ideal. As I exchanged vows with Jake, Mom, beaming with happiness, escorted me down the aisle. I saw that the rear seat, which was designated for Dad, was vacant. He had not arrived. I felt a twinge of melancholy, but then I remembered Jake, Mom, and everyone who genuinely loved and supported me, and I knew I had everything I needed.
Life has been a string of tough breaks and a few lucky strikes. Losing my parents early hit me hard, like a sting that never quite goes away. But I got lucky when the elderly couple next door, the Parkers, took me in. They were the kindest souls you could imagine, treating me more like a granddaughter than a charity case. We weren't rich in money, but we were wealthy in love, and that's what mattered. Then, just as I was coming into my own, turning 18 and thinking about college, they died in a car accident. Just like that, I was on my own again. The Parkers left me a bit of money for school and their old house in the suburbs. It was a cozy place full of memories, but too many ghosts for me, so I sold it and bought a small apartment in the city near the college where I'd enrolled to study financial management. It felt good having a plan moving forward. Classes were tough but interesting, and I threw myself into learning everything about numbers and markets. After college, I landed a decent job. Daytimes were packed with work, and I was doing all right, but nights were another story. The city felt lonelier than it should for a place so full. That's when I met Tom at a friend's party. He was loud, funny, and didn't care who knew it. His energy was infectious, and we hit it off from the moment he bumped into me, spilling my drink. "Hey, watch it," I snapped, more out of surprise than anger. "Whoa, my bad. Let me make it up to you." "What were you drinking?" Tom grinned unapologetically. "Beer, just beer," I said, trying not to smile too easily. "2 beers coming right up," he shouted over the music, heading to the makeshift bar. That was Tom all over, simple, straightforward, and no fuss. We spent the whole night talking about everything and nothing. It turned out we both loved old movies and hated sushi. It was easy talking to him, and by the time the party was winding down, I didn't want to say goodbye. A year later he proposed. No dramatic gestures, just him, me, and a ring he fumbled out of his pocket while we were watching TV. "Marry me," he said, holding the ring so tightly I thought he might crush it. I laughed. I actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so typical of us, so perfectly imperfect. "Yes, of course, you big goof." Getting married didn't change much at first. We were the same, just legally bound, which felt right. We settled into life together in my small city apartment, still close to the hustle but now with someone to share the quiet moments. Life felt full, and for the first time in a long while, the evenings didn't feel so empty. Settling into married life had its comforts, but life sure doesn't let you get too cozy without throwing a curveball or two. Harry's folks, Mr. and Mrs. Dawson, were gems. Living in their cozy suburban home, they welcomed me with open arms from the get-go. I could see where Harry got his easygoing nature. Their warmth was a balm on my often sore heart, still aching from my own family losses. "So happy you're part of our family now," Mrs. Dawson would often say, squeezing my hand with a kindness that felt both uplifting and overwhelming. "Thanks. I really appreciate how welcoming you've been," I'd reply, feeling genuinely grateful. Visiting them became our weekend ritual. Those days were filled with backyard barbecues and lengthy chats over cups of steaming coffee. Life was good, simple, and honest, until it wasn't. Harry got called away on a long business trip, a whole year out of state. It was a fantastic opportunity for his career, but the timing was brutal. No sooner had Harry left than Mr. and Mrs. Dawson's health took a nosedive. It happened fast, and Mrs. Dawson, bless her heart, sounded near out of her mind with worry when she called. "Grace, I hate to ask, but I could really use your help around here. Mr. Dawson is really not doing well," her voice thick with unshed tears. Without a second thought, I packed a bag and headed to the suburbs. Seeing Mr. and Mrs. Dawson so frail shook me. He had always been a pillar, strong and steady. Now he looked shrunken, tethered to his life through a maze of medical tubes. I slipped into the routine of their household seamlessly, handling the cooking and cleaning while Mrs. Dawson focused on Mr. Dawson's care. Evenings I spent sitting by Mr. and Mrs. Dawson's side, reading aloud his favorite classics, his eyes often fluttering closed long before I finished a chapter. "Thank you, Grace," he'd whisper on good days, his voice a shadow of his former robust tone. "It's my pleasure, really," I'd say, squeezing his hand, trying to offer comfort through simple touch. One quiet afternoon, Mrs. Dawson sat down at the kitchen table while I was chopping vegetables for dinner. She looked worn, older than her years. "Grace, I don't know how to say this, but we're in a bit of a bind," she began, nervously wringing her hands. "Mr. Dawson was the main earner, you know, and with him like this." I put down the knife, giving her my full attention. "We're strapped, honey. I hate to even ask, but could you consider renting out your apartment? It might help us get through this tough spot." She looked down, clearly embarrassed. I didn't even hesitate. "Of course, Mrs. Dawson. I'll get on it right away," I said firmly, trying to ease her burden. The apartment rented out quickly, and every month I dutifully transferred the rental income to Mrs. Dawson, along with money for groceries and whatever bills piled up. It wasn't easy. The commute to my job in the city became a nightmare. But family sticks together, right? That's what I kept telling myself, even on the hardest days. "You're a godsend, Grace," Mrs. Dawson would often say, her relief palpable each time I handed her the money. "It's what family does," I'd respond. Though some nights, as I lay in the guest room, listening to the distant sounds of sirens from the city, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the world on my shoulders. Harry's calls were my only respite, his voice a tether to another life. "How's it going, Kim? You holding up okay?" His concern was always evident, even through the static of long-distance calls. "We're managing, don't worry about us." I'd force cheerfulness into my voice, not wanting to add to his stress. Life in the Dawson household took a drastic turn when Emily, Mrs. Dawson's daughter from her first marriage, showed up unexpectedly. The vibe shifted immediately. She had that kind of presence, like a cold breeze that sneaks under the door. I never really knew Emily well, but I'd heard enough from Harry and even glimpsed her frosty relationship with Mr. and Mrs. Dawson during brief, tense visits. My days had already stretched thin, juggling long commutes to work and caring for Mr. and Mrs. Dawson, who was now bedridden and fading fast. Emily's arrival, however, added a whole new layer of tension. It was clear she was here to stay, making herself at home as if she owned the place. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Mr. Dawson beckoned me to his side with a weak gesture. His voice was a hoarse whisper, strained and urgent. "Grace, you need to watch out for Emily. She's a very bad person," he said, the gravity in his tone pulling a knot tight in my stomach. "I understand, Mr. Dawson. I'll be careful, I promised, though I wasn't exactly sure what I was promising against." True to Mr. Dawson's warning, Emily wasted no time establishing her new regime. The first sign was when I found her in a kitchen one morning, her presence like a storm cloud over the breakfast nook. "Just so we're clear, I'm not here to play housemaid or chef for anyone," she declared, her tone sharp as she sipped her coffee, eyeing me like I was an intruder in her mother's kitchen. I was taken aback but managed to keep my cool. "Okay, Emily, I've been handling things so far. And I can keep at it," I said, trying to keep the peace. "Good, because I don't plan on lifting a finger. This is Mom's house after all," she snapped back, her eyes daring me to challenge her. From that day on, Emily made sure her presence was felt, and not in a good way. She'd ordered takeout just for herself and her mother, leaving their empty boxes on the table for me to clean up. Her disdain wasn't subtle, and it stung. But I swallowed the bitterness because Mr. and Mrs. Dawson needed peace. "Grace, why don't you sit and eat with us tonight?" Mrs. Dawson asked one evening, a rare moment of old warmth in her voice. Before I could respond, Emily cut in sharply. "Mom, Grace has been busy all day. She probably prefers eating later." Her words were coated with fake concern, but the message was clear. I wasn't welcome. The days grew heavier, my chores doubling. Emily's entitlement filled every corner of the house. I hear her late at night, whispering with her mother, turning her against me with poison words. Mrs. Dawson, once so kind and understanding, started to change too, her looks colder, her thank yous fewer. A couple of weeks later, Mr. Dawson was gone. The funeral was a solemn affair, with Harry flying in just in time to say his goodbyes. It was the first time in months we were together, and the relief of having him by my side was palpable. Yet amidst the mourning, I noticed the air had shifted significantly at the Dawson residence. Emily was on her best behavior, treating everyone with forced politeness. "How's everything been while I've been gone?" Harry asked me quietly during a brief moment we had alone after the service. "Fine. Everything's been fine," I lied, forcing a smile. I didn't want to burden him further, his grief was enough to handle. "You sure? You look a bit worn out," he pressed, his brow furrowed with concern. "It's just been busy, helping out around here." I reassured him, avoiding his gaze. It wasn't the time to delve into the mess that was brewing beneath the surface. As soon as Harry left, Emily dropped her act. The mask of the dutiful sister was gone, replaced by the sneering, dismissive attitude I'd grown accustomed to. The dynamic in the house shifted drastically. Mrs. Dawson, perhaps in her own throbbing grief, became distant and cold towards me. Commands replaced conversations, and I felt more like an intruder than a family member. Emily took over the household like she was the lady of the manor. Her reign was marked by disregard for anyone's feelings but her own. She started barging into my room without knocking, rummaging through my things as though searching for buried treasure. One afternoon, I was out in the garden trying to find some peace when I stumbled upon a box lying among the shrubs. Curiosity piqued, I opened it only to find my watches, jewelry, and even some underwear. My heart sank. Nearby, draped carelessly over a bush, were several of my dresses. Fury bubbled up inside me as I gathered my belongings, clutching the box. I stormed inside, finding Emily in the living room, lounging like she owned the place. "What the hell, Emily?" I demanded, my voice shaking with rage. "You can't just throw my stuff out." Emily laughed, a cold, harsh sound that echoed mockingly around the room. "Live here, please. You're just a guest, and not a welcome one. You should be out in the garden, or better yet, on the street. You're nothing but a ruthless beggar anyway." Her words stung like salt in a wound. I couldn't believe the venom in her voice. Trembling, I turned to Mrs. Dawson, who had just entered the room. "Mrs. Dawson, please tell her she can't treat you like this. This is supposed to be my home too," I pleaded, my voice cracking. Mrs. Dawson, once kind and gentle, now looked through me as if I were glass. "This is Emily's house now. She's right, Grace. Maybe it's time you found somewhere else to live. Her words were a blow I hadn't anticipated. I stood there, the box in my hands, my heart breaking in my chest. The home I had come to know, the family I thought I had, crumbled around me in that instant. Despite everything, I stayed because of a promise I made to Mr. Dawson on his deathbed, to look after his wife and not let Emily overpower her. But day by day, Mrs. Dawson seemed to adopt Emily's cruel traits. Her words turned sharp, her eyes cold. "You're just sitting on your hands here, aren't you?" Mrs. Dawson snapped one evening as I cleaned up after dinner, her voice dripping with disdain. "I'm doing my best to keep things running smoothly," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite the hurt her words caused. "Best? Could have fooled me. Seems like you're just freeloading," she scoffed, turning her back to me as she left the room. Her words stung. I was far from a freeloader. I had rented out my apartment and transferred nearly all that income to Mrs. Dawson, on top of handling most of the housework while Emily did nothing but criticize. Emily, living off her mother's pension, was relentless. "Really, what does my brother even see in you?" She would taunt me nightly, her voice loud enough to carry through the thin walls. I'd bite my tongue, swallow the anger and frustration, and remind myself of the promise I made. But the atmosphere was suffocating, the house a minefield of hostility. One evening, coming home early from work, my world tilted on its axis. I walked in to hear Emily and Mrs. Dawson in the middle of a heated discussion in the living room, not noticing my arrival. "We need to get her to sell that apartment of hers. You know how much we could use that money," Emily was saying, her tone greedy and calculating. "Yes, but how do we convince her? Grace is no fool. She won't just hand it over," Mrs. Dawson replied, her voice a mix of frustration and greed. "Leave it to me, Mom. I'll sweet talk her into it. Once she signs it over, we can finally live the way we deserve." Emily's words slithered through the air like a snake. Hearing them plot to strip me of my only financial security was a cold splash of reality. Fear gripped me. I couldn't stay anymore. My heart pounding, I slipped away to my room unnoticed. They were planning to rob me of everything. The decision was made right then. There was no staying after this. Hurriedly packing my essentials, my hands shaking, every second in that house now felt like a countdown to disaster. I didn't bother with goodbyes. They didn't deserve them. Slipping out the back door, I ordered a taxi to the station. Sitting on the train to Harry's state, doubts swirled in my mind. Would Harry understand? Would he take their side? The uncertainty was crushing, but the fear of what might happen if I stayed was worse. I stared out the window, watching the landscape blur by, a mix of fear and resolve settling in my chest. When I arrived at Harry's place, his reaction was a cocktail of shock, relief, and a swirl of questions. His eyes widened as he opened the door to find me standing there, bag in hand, looking probably as frazzled as I felt. "Grace, what are you doing here? Is everything okay?" he asked, stepping aside to let me in. I hesitated, taking in the familiar, comforting sight of his temporary home. "No, Harry, everything's not okay." "Not at all," I replied, my voice catching a bit. He led me to the couch, his expression now lined with worry. "Talk to me, babe." "What happened?" he urged. I told him everything, starting from Emily's return, the worsening conditions at home, the financial manipulations, and the final straw, the plot to make me sell my apartment. I hadn't wanted to worry him before, didn't want to add to his stress while he was away working. Harry's face darkened with every word I spoke. By the time I finished, his fists were clenched, his jaw set hard. "Why didn't you tell me any of this before?" he asked, his voice a mix of anger and concern. "I didn't want to cause more trouble. I thought I could handle it." I admit, feeling foolish now, Grace. "Damn it. You shouldn't have to handle anything like that alone," he exploded, standing up to pace the room. "I can't believe my mom and Emily would treat you this way." He stopped and looked at me, his eyes intense. "I'm not letting anyone treat my wife like that." "No way," he declared, pulling out his phone. I watched, heart pounding, as he dialed his mother. The phone barely rang twice before she picked up. I couldn't hear her words, but the stiffness in Harry's shoulders told me enough. "Mom, this has to stop. I know about everything, and I won't tolerate it. If Emily doesn't leave, and if you don't start treating Grace with respect, you can forget about us helping out anymore. No more money, no more nothing." Harry's voice was steel, not giving room for any argument. There was a brief, fiery exchange, then silence. Harry's hand tightened around the phone. Fine. If that's your choice, then you've made mine, he said finally and hung up. He turned to look at me, his expression softening. Looks like it's just us now, babe. That's all we need, he said, coming over to wrap me in his arms. I leaned into him, the safety of his embrace fortifying me against the whirlwind of emotions. Just us, I murmured, feeling the truth of his words. We were on our own now, but somehow that felt okay. Harry and I talked long into the night. We discussed practical things like my remote work arrangements and our financial plans without the extra drain of supporting his mother, Emily. It felt like we were laying the foundations for a new chapter. Just the two of us. Whatever happens, we're in this together. You and me against the world, right? Harry said with a determined grin. Right, I smiled back, feeling more confident with him by my side. Against the world. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. I contacted my job to arrange remote work, which thankfully they agreed to. Harry helped me move my things from storage and set up a home office in the corner of his living room. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and it was peaceful. A week into our newfound peace, I was jolted by a call that almost felt like a ghost from a past life. It was Mrs. Dawson. Her voice, once sweet to me, now dripped with a mix of desperation and audacity. Grace, why haven't I received the money for this month? You know we depend on it, she demanded right off the bat. I was stunned silent for a moment, her nerve unbelievable. I'm sorry that after everything, you really expect me to continue supporting you? I asked, my tone more incredulous than angry. In the background, I could hear Emily's voice, shrill and angry. She's just an ungrateful girl, Make her transfer the money. Taking a deep breath to calm my rising anger, I remembered the venomous words they had thrown at me, words that stung deep. Mrs. Dawson, Emily called me a ruthless beggar, remember? I'm not sending money to people who treat me like trash. I'm done. There was a pause on the other end, and I could almost picture Mrs. Dawson's shocked face. But we're family, she finally said, her voice a mixture of anger and pleading. No, family doesn't treat each other that way. Goodbye, Mrs. Dawson, I said firmly and hung up before she could respond. The call shook me, but Harry was right there, his support unwavering. You did the right thing, Grace. It's time they learn to stand on their own, he reassured me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. Not long after settling back into our hometown, another surprise came our way. I was pregnant. The news brought a joy we hadn't expected, and suddenly the future seemed filled with possibilities. We decided it was time to sell my apartment and buy a small house in the suburbs, a place near a good school where our child could grow up. As we were planning our move, another call came, again from Mrs. Dawson. Her tone was different this time, desperate, almost pitiful. Grace, I've made a mistake. Emily forced me to sell the house, took the money, and left me with nothing. Could I come and live with you and Harry? Her voice was shaky, pleading. The request stunned me. After everything, this was a test of my resolve. Mrs. Dawson, you chose this path when you sided with Emily against us. You could have chosen differently, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I know I've made mistakes, but you have a kind heart. Can't you forgive an old woman for her wrong choices? She implored. I sighed, feeling a pang of pity, but remembering the pain her choices had caused. I forgave you long ago, but that doesn't mean I can let you back into my life. You need to live with the consequences of your actions just as I have, I replied and ended the call. Then with a resolute tap, I blocked her number. We moved forward with our plans, purchasing a quaint house with a little garden where our child could play. It was a lazy Sunday morning, the kind where you linger over coffee and the newspaper. I was flipping through the pages when a headline caught my eye. Local woman arrested for massive fraud scheme. There, staring back at me from the paper, was Emily, handcuffed and looking defeated. I couldn't help the mix of shock, and admittedly, a slight vindication that washed over me. Look at this, Harry. I called out, holding up the newspaper for him to see. It's Emily. She's been arrested for fraud. Harry took the newspaper, scanning the article with a serious expression. Wow. Can't say I'm surprised, but still, it's a lot to take in. Yeah, it is. But she made her choices, and now she's facing the consequences. I replied, feeling a closure I hadn't realized I needed. The news eventually drifted to us through friends that Mrs. Dawson was living in a tiny apartment, working 2 jobs to scrape by. Her pension wasn't enough to cover her living expenses and pay off the debt Emily had left her with. Did you hear about your mom? One of Harry's friends, Matt, brought it up one evening when they were over for a backyard barbecue. Yeah, I heard, Harry responded, flipping burgers on the grill. His voice held a trace of sadness but was tempered with resolve. She chose her path, Matt. It's tough, but that's how it is. Matt nodded, understanding the unspoken boundaries. You're right, man. Just thought you should know. The conversation shifted after that. The evening air filled with lighter topics of sports and work. Life had moved on, as so had we. The joy of our new life really crystallized when Mia came into the world. Becoming parents changed everything. It shifted our priorities, our dreams, and even healed some of the old wounds by filling them with new love. Can you believe she's ours? I whispered to Harry one night as we watched Mia sleeping peacefully in her crib. She's perfect, Grace, just perfect, Harry murmured back, his voice thick with emotion. We spent our days marveling at each little milestone Mia achieved, each smile, each giggle. She was our little miracle, and with her the hardships of the past seemed to recede, making room for new memories, better ones. Each day was simple but filled with little moments of joy that stitched a tapestry of a happy family life.
My daughter finally opened the farm-to-table restaurant she had always dreamt of after quitting her job at the bank. When I visited the restaurant on the day of her big opening party, I noticed her standing there by herself, looking sad. Sam canceled the 30-person reservation for her old coworkers who were scheduled to join her in celebrating today. Tears clouded her eyes and her voice wavered as she said, "Something snapped inside of me at that very instant." I hastily picked up my phone and dialed the bank where she had formerly worked. "Get Mr. Iverson, the president of the bank, on the phone right now." My heart began to burn with rage. The name Keith Ashford is mine. I'm enjoying a carefree second chapter of my life after taking an early retirement. Since my wife passed away more than 10 years ago, my daughter Macy has been my only relative. My greatest happiness in life has come from seeing Macy pursue her goals. She gave me an unusual phone call this morning. "Hey, Dad, I'm in need of your help. Is that acceptable?" "Of course. What's up?" "Would you be able to accompany me when I visit a property? I truly want you to join me in enjoying my day off." "Oh, did you find a good one?" "Indeed, a restaurant property just came up for sale. I won't need to do much renovating, and the location is excellent." "That sounds ideal." "All right, I'll prepare. Please give me some time." After hanging up, I began preparing to go. Not only was opening a restaurant Macy's goal, but my late wife's as well. It makes me very happy to see Macy go closer to achieving her objective. Macy and I met in front of the house. "Dad, over here." Macy smiled brightly and waved heartily. "Thanks for coming, Dad. If it's your request, there's no reason for me to refuse. So, this is the property you mentioned over the phone." "Yes, it is in a peaceful region, yet it is easily accessible, and there is a farm close by. Isn't it fantastic?" "Yes, it is." "Okay, let us see what it looks like. The realtor gave you the key, correct?" "Yep, let's go in." I followed Macy inside once she opened the door and entered. The air was softly scented with wood. Wow, this is pretty nice. It was compact but comfortable, with a warm hardwood interior that made a big statement. "So, this was a restaurant before?" "Exactly. It just became available because the former owner retired due to aging." "I understand. It certainly feels older, but that's part of its beauty. It is tidy and well maintained." I tested the counter's robust construction by running my hand over it. The interior is gorgeous. With a few adjustments, you could launch your company immediately. "Do you believe that? I suppose I'll go for it after that." Macy, who was now behind the counter, approached me with a smile. "It's finally happening. I'm going to start my own place. Do you think Mom's watching over me?" "She absolutely is, Macy. She's proud of you, and so am I. Go for it. I've got your back." "Thanks, Dad." Her eyes sparkled with excitement, and her smile was bright. Seeing her like this filled me with pride. After the property tour, we decided to relax at a nearby cafe. As we sipped coffee, memories of the past came flooding back. Macy was in middle school when her mother passed away. Even after being diagnosed with a terminal illness, my wife remained the bright, steadfast center of our family. Her dream was to one day own her own restaurant. Back then, I was just a humble office worker, saving up for her dream by working together as a dual income household. I did everything I could to make her dream come true. Her dream of having her own restaurant gradually became my dream as well. As a family, we often talked about our dreams, firmly believing that one day they would come true. "Dad, are you okay?" Macy's voice brought me back to the present. "Huh. Oh, I was just reminiscing, thinking about your mom." I offered a faint smile and sipped my coffee to mask my emotions. Seeing this, Macy smiled gently at me. "Don't worry, Dad. I'll make Mom's dream come true." "Thank you, Macy. She'd be so proud." When Macy was working hard at the local bank to save up for the restaurant, I often offered to help her financially, but she always said, "I want to achieve it on my own," and refused my help. So I decided to respect her wishes and just watch over her. Honestly, her stubbornness when she sets her mind to something reminds me of myself. "You've done so well on your own, Macy." "It's thanks to you, Dad. You've always been there for me. I might rely on you more in the future, but when I do, I hope you won't mind." "Of course. Lean on me anytime. I'll do anything for you." "Thanks, Dad. I'm counting on you." Macy nodded with a cheerful smile. Looking at her happy expression, I silently vowed to dedicate the rest of my life to supporting her. Not long after, Macy quit the bank and began preparing earnestly to open her restaurant. In the days leading up to the opening, Macy worked on perfecting her dishes inside the Suntoe restaurant. From the small kitchen, a delightful aroma filled the air. "Dad, it's ready." Macy brought out several dishes and placed them in front of me, where I was seated at the counter. The main dishes, featuring seasonal vegetables, meats, and seafood sourced daily from nearby farms and markets, included many of the recipes my wife had excelled at. "Go ahead, give it a try." "Well, it looks flawless. Let's see how it tastes." I reached for the freshly made seafood galette. With the first bite, a nostalgic flavor filled my mouth. "How is it, Dad?" "It's unmistakably your mom's cooking." "Really? I'm so glad." Macy let out a sigh of relief and smiled. I couldn't help but smile back. "You've recreated Mom's recipes so perfectly, Macy. You're already a great chef." "Thank you, Dad. Being able to replicate Mom's cooking makes me so happy. Now that you've given it your seal of approval, I feel confident." "Good. Keep cherishing this flavor. Mom would want that." "Yeah, I will. And Dad, make sure to come by the restaurant often to eat, okay? Getting to eat your cooking every day would be the best gift for me. Then I'd better keep improving my skills for you too." Macy laughed a little shyly. In that moment, her smile looked so much like my late wife's. I felt a pang of bittersweet emotion in my chest and took a sip of the wine Macy had prepared to distract myself. "Hey, Dad." "Huh? What is it?" "Can I have a glass too?" "Of course." I tilted the bottle and poured wine into the glass Macy held out. We clinked glasses lightly, and Macy took a small sip of the wine. "Ah, it's delicious." "So, Macy, you finally come to appreciate the taste of good wine, huh?" "Of course, Dad. How old do you think I am?" "Huh. No matter how old you get, you'll always be my little girl." "Geez, you're always treating me like a kid." Macy pouted slightly, looking mildly annoyed, but I couldn't help it. Even if Macy gets married, has children, and becomes a mother herself, she'll always be my daughter. One day, as the restaurant's opening drew near, I got a call from Macy. "Hello, Dad. I need your advice on something." Sure, what's up? Well, what's the best way to handle a big order of ingredients? Do you think it's okay to suddenly change plans with the supplier? What's wrong? Are the current arrangements not enough? Yeah, actually. Macy's voice sounded puzzled yet somewhat light and bouncy. It didn't seem like bad news, so I waited patiently for her to continue. The folks from the bank are throwing a farewell and opening party for me at the restaurant. About 30 people are coming. That's amazing. But with 30 people, you'll have to reserve the whole restaurant. Yeah, that's the plan. I'm thinking of making it a pre-opening event too. That's a great idea. All right, Macy, make a list of the ingredients you'll need, and I'll help negotiate with the supplier. Really? Thanks, Dad. Can you come by the restaurant later? Of course, I'm free today, so I'll head over right away. I hung up and got ready to head to Macy's restaurant. When I arrived and opened the door, Macy greeted me with a big smile. You're quick, Dad. Yeah, so do you have the ingredient list ready? Yep, here's the list, and these are the contacts for the new suppliers I'm planning to work with. Got it. Hang tight for a bit. Taking the list from her, I called the supplier. A friendly-sounding, middle-aged man answered and immediately agreed to the changes without any issues. All set. Macy, the supplier, was very accommodating and said to feel free to reach out if you need anything. That's great. Thanks so much, Dad. Anything else you need help with? I've got the car today, so I can take you wherever you need to go. Really? In that case, could you take me to the store? I want to pick up some kitchen equipment. Of course, just give me a second. I'll pull the car around. Feeling a sense of purpose in Macy relying on me so much today, I moved my car from the nearby lot to the front of the restaurant. I honked lightly, and Macy came out, hopping into the passenger seat. Thanks so much for today, Dad. You've been a huge help. Anytime. Your mom's dream of running a restaurant became my dream too, you know. Yeah, then I'll count on you more from now on. Please do. Glancing at Macy's cheerful expression, I began driving slowly. After a while, Macy started giggling softly. I'm surprised. Surprised by what? Well, the one who told me about the party for my opening and farewell was Sam, my boss. He was always scolding me, so I never expected him to do something like this for me. Macy, your hard work must have paid off. Be grateful and accept it with an open heart. Yeah, you're right. Okay, I'll give it my all to leave a lasting impression, even on Sam. Yes, I'm rooting for you too, Macy. I felt relieved knowing that Macy seemed to have been fortunate with the people at her previous workplace. Seeing her cheerful smile, I found myself eagerly anticipating the opening day of her restaurant, my heart racing with excitement. And then, the big day finally arrived. Macy, will she be okay? Although Macy had told me beforehand by saying, Dad doesn't have to do anything, I couldn't sit still at home and made a phone call to Macy. After a few rings, Macy, who seemed busy with preparations, answered. Dad, what's wrong? Did something happen? No, nothing's wrong here. Macy, are you sure you don't need any help? I'm fine. If I can't handle this alone, I won't survive in this business. So, Dad, please relax at home today. Okay. I'll call you after it's all over. I see. But call me right away if something comes up. I will. Don't worry. Thanks, Dad. Bye for now. She ended the call abruptly. Still, I couldn't shake off my worry thinking about Macy managing everything alone. I felt restless and uneasy. No, I can't. I have to go. Murmuring to myself, I hurriedly got ready and left the house. I got in the car and drove straight to Macy's restaurant. When I arrived, the area around the restaurant was still quiet, with no customers in sight. Maybe I came too early, but people will show up soon enough. Thinking I could lend a hand and also greet her former colleagues, I decided to step inside. Macy, are you here? Sorry, I couldn't help but come. Inside the restaurant was empty, and Macy was standing alone behind the counter. Macy, what's wrong? Did something happen? I called out to her, and she slowly turned to face me. Dad, her voice trembled, and tears welled up in her eyes. I rushed over to her side instinctively. Macy, what's going on? Weren't your former coworkers supposed to be here today? Something was clearly amiss. The seats were already set with large platters of food. The preparations seemed perfect, yet no one had arrived. What happened? It had to be something serious. When I pressed her for an answer, Macy began speaking haltingly, tears streaming down her face. Just now Sam called. Sam? Oh, your former manager, right? The one who made the reservation for the party. Yeah, but he said the party is canceled. He told me no one wants to celebrate a loser like me who quit the bank, and then he hung up. Unable to hold it in any longer, Macy broke down in tears. What he said, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After all the effort Macy had put into her preparations, this was a cruel and unjust blow. A fire of anger ignited in my heart. Macy, wait here. I took out my cell phone and called the headquarters of the bank where Macy used to work. Dad, what are you doing? Just leave this to me for now, I said firmly, silencing her worried protests. After a few rings, a young receptionist answered the phone. Hello, could you connect me to Mr. Iverson, the president of the bank? May I ask who's calling? The receptionist's tone grew cautious, and she asked again, sounding slightly wary. I paused for a moment and cleared my throat deliberately. Apologies, my name is Keith Ashford. Could you please connect me to Mr. Henry Iverson, the bank president? The moment I said that, her attitude shifted dramatically. Mr. Ashford, my deepest apologies. I'll connect you to President Iverson immediately. Her flustered reaction was clear even over the phone. Please hold on a moment, she said, her voice hurried, before the hold music began to play. Not long after, a familiar voice came on the line. Henry Iverson, the president of the bank where Macy used to work, and an old friend of mine from our college days, was on the other end of the line. Keith, what's going on? It's rare for you to call the bank directly like this. I've got some things to discuss, Henry. You sound upset. What's the matter, Keith? Henry seemed to pick up on the anger in my voice right away. I took a deep breath to steady myself before speaking. It's serious. I need to talk to you in person. I'll send you the location. My daughter's restaurant. Come immediately. Understood. I'll be there soon. After confirming his response, I hung up. Dad, what was that about? Are you saying Mr. Iverson is coming here? Macy asked, clearly surprised. Don't worry about it, Macy. Let me handle this. I'll explain everything later. Reassuring her as best as I could, I sat and waited quietly for Henry to arrive. About half an hour later, the door to the restaurant opened, and Henry appeared, slightly out of breath. It was clear he had rushed to get here. Keith, what's going on? I echoed, standing up. Your employee canceled a 30-person reservation at the last minute. 30 people. Henry's eyes widened in shock. He immediately turned to Macy, who was standing behind the counter, still processing the situation. This is completely unacceptable. I sincerely apologize for what happened. Mr. Iverson, how do you know my dad? Macy asked, her confusion evident as she looked between the two of us. Well, I said, deciding it was time to reveal what I had kept quiet for so long. Henry and I go way back. We were college classmates. What? Really? Macy's voice rose in surprise. Henry smiled warmly at her. You might not remember, but I've met you a few times when you were a little girl. Wait, does that mean? Macy trailed off, her expression tightening as if a sudden realization had struck her. But Henry shook his head reassuringly. No, your position at the bank was entirely your own doing. It was purely coincidental, and your success there was all because of your talent. Please don't worry about that. Oh, I see, Macy said, exhaling a small sigh of relief. But another question seemed to trouble her, and she tilted her head with a puzzled expression. But would you really come all this way just because you're old friends? Ha ha, that's not the only reason. Keith is a significant figure for our bank. What? Dad, what does he mean? Macy turned to me, clearly bewildered. I took a deep breath, preparing to finally disclose what I had kept hidden. Macy, there's something I haven't told you. A long time ago, I ran a business. I was the CEO. After I married your mom, I sold the company to help fund her dream. Since then, I've been managing investments in various fields, and the main bank I've worked with all these years is Henry's. What? Really? I had no idea. Macy stared at me, her eyes wide with astonishment. I smiled apologetically. I'm sorry, Macy. The truth is, I could have provided the funds for the restaurant's operations right away, but you chose your own path and accomplished all of this through your own hard work. I'm proud of you. Macy shook her head gently and gave me a smile in return. Thank you, Dad, for always watching over me. They say struggles when you're young are worth it. I think, because of those experiences, I've been able to come this far. But to have such a big failure right from the start, as if remembering everything, her face was once again clouded with sadness. I shot a sharp glance at Henry, who immediately leaned forward, looking at Macy with concern. Macy, I'm deeply sorry for this. Could you tell me the name of the employee who canceled the reservation? Oh yes, it was Sam, my former branch manager. He's the one who made the reservation too. I see. Henry nodded thoughtfully, a perceptive look crossing his face. I had also begun to sense something suspicious after hearing Macy's account. Henry, what do you think? Honestly, I smell something fishy. Funny, I think so too, he replied. What do you mean? Macy asked, her voice tinged with worry. Henry gave a small smile. Let's get to the bottom of this. Macy, would you mind if I called in here right now? What? But I mean... Macy hesitated. It's okay. Let's trust Henry on this, I said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Hesitant, Macy looked at me, then gave a small nod. Okay, if you say so, Dad. Great, then it's decided, Henry said with a calm smile as he started dialing. He was calling Macy's former branch. Hello, this is Henry. Tell Sam to come to my location immediately. Let him know it's Macy's restaurant. This is urgent, so please make it happen quickly with an authoritative tone. Henry ended the call. Not long after, the restaurant door opened, and a man appeared. It was Sam. His face was tense, with beads of sweat forming on his forehead. Sam, Macy looked uneasy seeing him, but Sam seemed too flustered about being summoned by Henry to notice. Mr. Iverson, what are you doing here? Sam, I need to ask you something. Why did you cancel the reservation for this restaurant today? Well, under Henry's piercing gaze, Sam swallowed hard. Actually, several employees who were supposed to attend reported feeling unwell, and we had no choice but to cancel. Sam's face was dripping with sweat as he tried to escape Henry's gaze. And I am convinced this bastard is lying. Henry seemed to reach the same conclusion, his voice rising in exaggerated surprise. That's terrible. In that case, I should personally visit these stick employees to offer my regards. Sam, could you give me a complete list of their names? No, that won't be necessary. It's really nothing serious. Oh, well, then there was no reason to cancel the entire reservation, was there? And surely not all 30 attendees fell ill. Well, Sam's stammering was so evident, it was infuriating to listen to. I sighed deeply and turned to Henry. Henry, enough. This is getting us nowhere. You're right. Okay, let's get confirmation from someone else. Macy, can you call one of your trusted former colleagues? Put it on speaker so we can all hear. Oh, okay. Still hesitant. Macy pulled out her phone and started dialing. After a few rings, a cheerful woman's voice came through the phone. Macy, it's rare for you to call. What's up? Now, Natalie, I'm sorry to bother you suddenly, but I need to ask you something. Sure, what is it? The woman Macy called, Natalie, sounded completely unaware of the situation. At that moment, I became certain of something. It seemed Macy also started to understand what was going on. Taking a deep breath to steady herself, Macy nervously began to speak. Well, there was supposed to be a party today at my restaurant with everyone from the branch. Did you know about it, Natalie? A party? No, I haven't heard anything about that. Wait, what? A party at your restaurant today? You're kidding. Who's organizing this? It was Sam who made the reservation, but he said everyone who was supposed to attend got sick, so it had to be canceled. What? That's ridiculous. No one's called in sick today, and everyone's perfectly healthy. Unbelievable. What on earth is Sam thinking? This is absurd. Her indignant voice echoed through the restaurant. I let out a heavy sigh, muttering, I knew it, as Henry shrugged in exasperation beside us. Sam shrank like a frog cornered by a snake. Just then, another voice came through the phone. Macy, can you hear me? It's Sean. A young man's voice, this time. Shan, judging by the conversation, seemed to be one of Macy's colleagues. Sounding urgent, he called out to Macy from the other end of the line. Natalie and I are coming to the restaurant right now. Wait for us. Hey, wait. Shan, sorry. Macy, we'll be there soon. With the sound of commotion on the other end, the call abruptly ended. Natalie, Sean, Macy whispered their names as she teared up and sank to the floor, overwhelmed. I'm glad for you, Macy. Yeah, I'm so relieved. I thought everyone hated me. Supporting her gently by the shoulders, I patted her back softly a few times. Before long, the restaurant door burst open with a loud bang. Macy, are you okay? Shan and Natalie too. Macy, I'm so sorry. We were all planning to celebrate your opening after you settled in, but I had no idea this would happen. Out of breath, the two hurried to Macy's side, sparing only a brief, sharp glare at Sam, who was cowering in the corner. By the way, what is Sam doing here? When the topic of celebrating Macy's opening came up, he said he wouldn't participate and we should do whatever we want. Wanted Sam, care to explain yourself? Both of them turned on Sam with stern voices, making him squirm uncomfortably under their scrutiny. Finally, he gave in and began to speak. Well, I was just messing around. Macy's dream of running her own place seemed so naive, so I thought I'd give her a dose of reality. I just wanted to show her how the real world works. Sam's words came out as if he were trying to justify his actions. At that moment, something inside me snapped. What did you just say? I stepped forward, closing the distance between us, my anger boiling over. You think you can teach someone about reality? Any dream that's achieved becomes reality. Don't you get that? Ah, Dad, stop please. Macy stepped in to stop me, just as I grabbed Sam by the collar and raised my fist. Dad, I'm okay now. It's fine. Macy's right, Heath. Calm down. Sorry. I released Sam from my grip, prompted by Henry's calm but firm rebuke. Henry sighed, a mix of exasperation and relief on his face. Macy, I'm sorry for all the trouble caused. Take this, please. Henry pulled out a check from his pocket and handed it to Macy. Even from a distance, it was clear the amount was substantial. Macy immediately shook her head, flustered. I can't accept this. It's far too much. It's fine. Consider any extra as my contribution to celebrate your opening. Or is it not enough? Henry smiled and placed a second check, equally substantial, on top of the first, gently but insistently pushing both into Macy's hands. I'll organize a proper celebration for your grand opening another day, hosted by me. For now, why don't you invite family and friends to enjoy the food and mark this day? It would be a shame to let the dishes go to waste. Henry then turned to Sam. Oh, and Sam, you're coming with me. We'll have a little chat. Yes, sir. Henry's smile remained, but the unspoken authority behind it was impossible to ignore. Well, we'll be off now, he said, escorting a defeated-looking Sam out of the restaurant. Wow, Mr. Iverson is incredible. Hey, Macy, since he suggested it, can I call my husband to come to the restaurant now? Of course, Macy. I'll reach out to some of our colleagues from other branches. It's been ages since we've all gathered. Everyone would love to come. Yeah, let's do it. Thank you, Sean. Surrounded by her former coworkers, Macy's smile began to return, and I felt a wave of relief. I'm so glad for you, Macy, I murmured to myself, lightly touching the wedding ring still on my left hand. If my wife were here, she'd surely be standing beside me, watching over Macy with pride and love. A few days later, thanks to Henry's initiative, many people from the bank gathered at Macy's restaurant for a proper celebration. The restaurant was alive with laughter and light conversations. Macy, this is incredible. I can't believe you've opened such a beautiful restaurant. My husband came by the other day and loved it. He's planning to bring his colleagues next time. Really? That's wonderful. Thank you so much. The food here is so comforting. I'm sure you'll have regulars in no time. I'll probably become one myself. Thank you. Shan, if you do come, I'll make sure to treat you to something special. Macy chatted happily with her former colleagues, her joy palpable. Sitting a little away from the lively group, I sipped my drink, watching Macy's radiant smile warm my heart. Hey, you enjoying yourself? Henry suddenly appeared beside me, holding out his glass. Yeah, thanks to you. That's good to hear. We clinked glasses lightly, and Henry drained his wine in one go before placing a hand on my shoulder. Keith, I really am sorry about what happened the other day. Don't worry about it. I admit I might have overreacted a bit, but when it comes to Macy, I can't help myself. I knew I was overly protective of Macy, but I couldn't help it. She's my one and only daughter, more precious to me than life itself. Smiling ruefully at my own sentimentality, I downed another sip of my drink. So, what happened to Sam afterward? He left the bank. After all this, he'd made too many enemies, I think. You mean he wasn't fired? I asked curiously. Henry chuckled lightly, his tone playful. Who knows? What do you think? His smile was calm, but there was something inscrutable in Henry's gaze. I wouldn't put anything past this man, but I decided to leave it at that. Well, it's fine. In the end, Macy's restaurant opens successfully, and everyone has gathered here. Thank you, Henry. Oh, don't mention it. I just set the stage. It's all thanks to Macy's hard work. You're absolutely right. We raised our glasses, sharing a laugh together. The warm atmosphere of the restaurant resonated with the laughter of friends and family. I found myself wishing this moment could last forever. Time passed, and Macy's restaurant grew more and more successful. Henry, along with Macy's former colleagues, began frequenting the restaurant often, bringing family and friends. The place was always bustling with customers. In the evenings, the restaurant was filled with light conversations and laughter, creating a cozy and inviting ambience. Among Macy's regular visitors were Natalie and Sean, who seemed particularly close to her. They often shared drinks with us, becoming familiar faces at the restaurant. Wait, so Macy's dream of running her own restaurant was also your late wife's dream? Natalie exclaimed, pouring me another drink. And mine too. Macy made that dream come true, and I couldn't be more grateful. Thank you, Macy. I turned to Macy, who was standing behind the counter, her face softly illuminated by the warm lights. I couldn't have done it without you, Dad, and Natalie. Thanks for coming so often, Scene. You're practically here every day, aren't you? Macy grinned as she refilled Sean's empty glass with beer. He scratched his head sheepishly. Well, yeah, the food here is just so good. Thanks. It's all from recipes Mom taught me. Right, Dad? Yep, that's right. I nodded and glanced at Sean, who was looking intently at Macy. When I glanced at Natalie, she shrugged playfully as if confirming my suspicions. Ah, so that's how it is, I thought, feeling a twinge of mixed emotions. Still, I told myself it was a good thing. Sean, I called out. Yes, sir. He responded quickly, turning toward me with a nervous expression. Seeing his flustered face, I couldn't help but recall the time I met my wife's parents for the first time. Suddenly, I felt like rooting for him. Well, do your best. I'll tell you this. Macy's not the most perceptive in that regard. You'll have your work cut out for you. I'll do my best. Sean seemed to catch my meaning and nodded with determination, his face turning red. What a straightforward and decent young man, I thought, taking another sip of beer in good spirits. Seeing Macy's dream come true, supported by so many wonderful people, filled my heart with joy. The warm lights of the restaurant flickered gently. It felt almost as if my late wife was watching over us, and I swallowed the tears that threatened to well up. Hey, are you watching? Macy made her dream come true. I silently spoke to my wife in my heart as I touched the wedding ring on my left hand.
I was standing in front of the counter, holding the last money in my hands. With a determined sigh and hoping for the best, I bought a lottery ticket. My hands were shaking, and my heart was beating so hard that I could feel it in my ears. When I saw the numbers on the lottery ticket, I lost the ability to move. My name is Jennifer, and this is my story. It was Christmas Eve, and the table was set with all sorts of delectable treats. Grandma's turkey glistened in the dim candlelight, and Uncle Pete's famous mashed potatoes oozed with butter. As the night wore on, amidst the sound of laughter and the tinkle of silverware, the fortune biscuits were brought out. Aunt Jane, the more adventurous one, handed out the biscuit to each of us, insisting, "Go on, see what the future holds." As people cracked them open, they laughed, commenting on the absurdity or the vagueness of their fortunes. I gently cracked mine open, and as I read the little paper inside, my eyes widened. "You will win $10 million in the lottery." Everyone took turns reading their fortunes aloud. When it was my turn, I hesitated for a moment, but then, feeling the weight of all eyes on me, I read it out. A ripple of laughter broke out. "Oh, how wonderful!" Aunt Jane exclaimed, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Make sure to share with the rest of us," Uncle Pete chimed in. Despite the jests and jokes, something within me ignited. An unshakable belief. I wanted to believe, so I did. I believed in that tiny slip of paper more than I had ever believed in anything. From that day onwards, every week, I'd save a little from my meager paycheck to buy a lottery ticket. Every week, without fail. The cashier Mary at the convenience store would give me a half-pitying, half-amused smile each time, but I didn't care. Months rolled by, and each week, my ritual remained unchanged. My family would often bring up my fortune at gatherings, turning it into a running joke. I smiled through it all, holding on to that glimmer of belief. It wasn't just about the money. It was about proving to myself and everyone else that sometimes, just sometimes, you can shape your destiny with sheer will and belief. Years went by, and my life changed in ways I hadn't imagined on that fateful Christmas Eve. I fell in love with Alex, a humble librarian who had his roots in poetry and prose. We had 2 wonderful children, Liam and Ilara. And as life went on, the story of the fortune biscuit, though still retold, faded in the hubbub of life's daily chores and routines. Alex never questioned my ritual, and the kids grew up seeing me scratch those tickets every week. It had become less about the money and more about holding on to a piece of a past. Our home was filled with laughter, stories, and memories. Alex often read tales of heroes and heroines to the children, and I shared stories from my life, of dreams, and of the magic of believing. Yet, it was my undying ritual with the lottery tickets that silently spoke the loudest. Ilara, our eldest, took to the habit with amusement. She often accompanied me to buy the tickets, her young face lighting up with the thrill of it, hoping to witness another miracle. Liam, our youngest, was different. Quiet and observant, he watched, but rarely commented. Then, one day, as I sat scratching off a ticket, Liam, now a teenager, hesitated before saying, "Mom, you know, some of the kids at school, they laugh. They say their parents laugh about you still buying lottery tickets. They say you're chasing an old dream." I looked up, meeting his searching eyes. Alex, hearing our conversation, stopped reading and glanced over. Ilara shifted uncomfortably on the couch. I took a deep breath. "Liam," I began softly, "do you know why I still buy these tickets?" He shook his head. "Because of the fortune biscuit?" I chuckled. "Partly, But it's more than that. It's not about winning again. It's about remembering to believe in possibilities, no matter how unlikely they seem. Alex added, "It's like reading a good book, buddy. You know how the story goes, you know the ending, but you read it again to relive the emotions, to remember the lessons it taught." Liam looked thoughtful. "But if people are laughing, doesn't it bother you?" "It did, at first," I admitted. "But over time, I've realized that everyone has their own journey of belief. Mine just happens to be a little more public." I winked. Alara chimed in. "Mom's lottery tickets taught me that sometimes you've got to hold on to something, even if the whole world thinks you're silly. It's not about them. It's about what it means to you." Liam contemplated our words, and after a silent moment, he said, "Can I scratch the next one?" I handed him the ticket with a smile. As he began to scratch, our little living room, filled with books and memories, seemed to hold its breath. Time passed, and life brought its shares of ups and downs. Alara went off to college, chasing her dream of becoming a writer, inspired by her father's love for stories. Liam, with his introspective nature, took an interest in philosophy and the human psyche. Throughout the changes, the lottery tickets remained a constant. It was our family's quirky legacy, a symbol of unwavering belief amidst the ever-changing tides of life. And as the years went by, Liam, who once questioned the ritual, became its most ardent participant. Every week, he'd be there, ready with a coin to scratch off the numbers, his face lit with the same hope and belief that I felt all those years ago. The legacy of the fortune biscuit, it seemed, wasn't just about a win. It was about passing down a spirit of hope, resilience, and belief from one generation to the next. A testament that sometimes holding on to something, even in the face of ridicule, can shape not just your destiny, but that of those who come after you. The years continued their relentless march, bringing with them a myriad of changes. My hair now boasted strands of silver, and the lines on my face told stories of love, laughter, and life's lessons. Alex and I watched with pride as our children crafted lives of their own. Alara's words filled the pages of bestsellers, while Liam became a sought-after speaker, traveling the world and sharing his insights on the human spirit. One evening, as autumn painted the trees in hues of gold and crimson, I felt an inexplicable urge. The thought came suddenly, whispering to me like an old friend. It was time to buy my last lottery ticket. The next day, with the crisp fall air caressing my face, I walked to the same convenience store. Mary had long since retired, and the store was now managed by her grandson, Jake. He recognized me instantly, his face breaking into a smile. "Here for the usual?" he asked. I nodded. "But today's special. It's my last one." Jake's eyes widened in surprise. "The last one?" "Yes," I said, a soft smile playing on my lips. "Sometimes you just know when a chapter is about to end." He handed me the ticket with a reverence I hadn't expected. "Well, I hope you will definitely get lucky this time." I thanked him and headed home. The walk back felt nostalgic, each step echoing with memories of every hope-filled journey I'd taken to that store. When I reached home, the entire family had gathered, as if they all sensed the significance of the moment. I settled into my favorite chair, the ticket and a coin in hand. The room was thick with anticipation. Alex sat beside me, his hand in mine, while Alara and Liam stood close, watching intently. As I scratched off the first number, a familiar thrill ran through me. One by one, the numbers revealed themselves, and I was stunned. The numbers? They matched. A hushed silence filled the room, the weight of the realization slowly settling in. I had won 10 million. Liam let out a breathy laugh. You've got to be kidding me. Alara's eyes were moist as she said, It's like a fairy tale. Alex squeezed my hand, whispering, Looks like the universe had one more surprise for us. In the ensuing days, news of the win spread far and wide. Many were in disbelief, others called it fate, and some even called it a well-timed miracle. But as I stood amidst the whirlwind of attention and excitement, I realized the win wasn't the miracle. The true miracle was the journey itself, the unwavering belief, the commitment to hope, the resilience against doubt and ridicule, and the lesson it imparted to my children. As I sat down one evening, penning my thoughts in a journal, I reflected on everything: the first fortune biscuit, the years of buying tickets, the laughter and skepticism of others, and now this. And I concluded, sometimes miracles do come true. They may not arrive when we first envision them, nor in the manner we expect. But with unwavering belief and patience, the universe has a way of completing the circle, even after many, many years. And with that, I closed my journal, content in the knowledge that life, with all its mysteries and wonders, never truly stops surprising us. The key is to keep believing, always.